Okay, let's dive into this. When we think about finding alien life, our minds instinctively look up out into space.
Right. Scanning the skies, looking for planets like ours. It's all about location, where they are.
Exactly. That's the familiar way, isn't it?
Yeah.
But these sources we're looking at today, they really challenge that. They ask, what if we're looking in the wrong, well, not place, but the wrong time?
That's the really fascinating core idea here. Civilizations that might exist or interact across these huge nonlinear timescales. The sources call them chrono-civilizations.
Chrono-civilizations. Yeah, that immediately reframes things, doesn't it?
Hmm.
So our goal for this deep dive is to really unpack the key ideas from these sources, and they're quite a mix. You've got theoretical physics, anthropology, looking at deep time, some pretty mind-bending post-human stuff, too.
Yeah, it's a blend. The aim is to explore time, not just as, tick-tock on a clock, but potentially as a place to live, maybe a resource, even a whole different dimension for culture.
And what I find compelling is how they take physics we know, anthropology concepts we know, and just push that what-if question really hard. Like, what if relativity wasn't just something you measure, but somewhere you lived?
Exactly. So let's start there. With time as a habitat, we know from Einstein, right, that time isn't absolute.
It's relative. It stretches, it slows down near massive objects or when you're moving really fast. Time dilation.
And the source material uses this really vivid example. Imagine being near a black hole. Time can slow down so dramatically that, well, a minute for you near the event horizon could be years, maybe even decades, for someone watching from far away.
Okay, right, I remember that. And this is where the speculation really takes off. The sources ask, what if a civilization chose that? Deliberately set up shop in that kind of extreme environment?
Precisely. Imagine a whole society evolving, or maybe just moving to live near a supermassive black hole, their subjective time. It's just crawling compared to the rest of the universe.
So, well, maybe only a few hundred years pass for us. They could experience millions, billions even.
Potentially, yes. And think about what that means. It gives them these unimaginable stretches of subjective time. Eons for, well, reflection, for science, art, philosophy, developing knowledge.
Building things on timescales we just can't comprehend.
Exactly. And the sources mention specific research, like Miller's work back in 2020, modeling these kinds of relativistic habitats.
Near gravitational wells.
Yeah, and suggesting that this time-slowing effect could actually be useful. It could massively extend the lifespan or efficiency of complex computations, maybe for survival, maybe for running vast simulations or something.
And here's a key shift in thinking the sources push, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're not just saying time dilation is a weird physics thing. They frame time itself as,
Yeah.
well, almost like a resource.
Yes, not just something you measure, but something you could potentially leverage, manipulate, maybe even engineer.
Temporal engineers,
Yeah.
actively shaping time to suit their existence. That's the core idea there, turning physics into a tool.
It forces you to see time differently. Not just a river carrying you along, but maybe a landscape you can, I don't know, sculpt or navigate.
Okay, so that's living in warp time locally. But the sources also zoom out, way out, to deep time.
Yeah, billions of years, the whole cosmic history, makes human civilization look like a blink.
And this view really challenges that, that comfortable assumption that we're the pinnacle, that advanced life is this recent thing that just happened here.
What if intelligence isn't some linear track that Earth just finished running? What if it's happened before?
The sources bring up Robin Hanson's great filter idea here. The concept that there are these incredibly hard, improbable steps on the path from simple life to, say, spacefaring intelligence.
And most life probably hits one of those filters and just stops.
But the sources pose this really intriguing what if. What if some civilizations did get through those filters, maybe billions of years ago, and then they disappeared? Not necessarily died out, but...
Exited the stage. Yeah, the idea explored is maybe they entered some kind of hibernation.
Right, hibernation. But not just like bears sleeping through winter.
No, something more profound. Maybe waiting for the universe itself to change. Perhaps for conditions to become optimal for something like computation, maybe when it's much colder, much further into the future. Higher entropy, lower temperatures.
That connects to Max Tegmark's idea of cold computing, doesn't it? Civilizations slowing themselves right down, almost to a standstill, like seeds.
Exactly. Existing in a state of potential, waiting for the right cosmic season, you could say.
And this leads to another powerful point. Maybe the reason we don't see obvious signs of these ancient civilizations isn't because the galaxy's empty.
But because they're operating on a totally different clock than us. Or maybe their artifacts, their legacy, isn't pyramids and radio signals.
The sources get really speculative here, suggesting their culture, their knowledge, maybe their very being is encoded in forms we can barely conceive of looking for.
Things like the large-scale structure of dark matter, or maybe hidden in streams of neutrinos constantly passing through us.
Wow. Dark matter structures as libraries, neutrino messages. That's seriously mind-bending.
It implies the galaxy might not be silent and empty after all. It could be teeming with these timeless minds, just not active or visible on our timescale or in ways we recognize.
It fundamentally changes what looking for life even means, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these potential relativistic slow timers near black holes and ancient hibernators in deep time. This naturally leads to the next big idea, chronocultural diversity.
Right. If you can live at different speeds or in different temporal niches, how vastly different would your cultures become? We see huge cultural variation across space on Earth.
Now apply that to time itself. Their whole temporal logic could be alien.
The sources paint these extreme contrasts. Like, imagine a fast time society.
What would that be like?
Well, experience is hyper-compressed. Maybe centuries of philosophy happen in what we perceive as a second. Cities designed, built, maybe even crumble in minutes. Political revolutions flashing by in milliseconds.
Their entire history would be a frantic blur to us.
An incomprehensible storm of activity. And then the other extreme, a slow time civilization.
Okay, what are their values?
Maybe immense patience, harmony with slow cosmic processes, art that unfolds over geological or astronomical time.
The source mentioned examples, right?
Yeah,
Like a piece of music lasting 1,000 years.
yeah, or a sculpture that is the carefully engineered orbit of a planet around its star.
Planetary orbit is a work of art.
That's
Incredible. And the idea of time rituals.
Yes. Finding meaning not just in seasons or years, but in, say, the precise decay rate of a certain isotope, or the half-life of an element, or even the life cycle of a star lasting billions of years.
Encoding culture into fundamental physics constants and cosmic events.
It ties into anthropological ideas like Charles Laughlin's neurognosis, the idea that our culture actually shapes our basic consciousness, our perception.
How we experience reality.
Exactly. The sources speculate. What if civilizations could program their temporal perception? Maybe some live, hyper-focused in an infinitely detailed now. Others might exist across this vast, non-linear web of memories and future projections simultaneously.
And then there's AI, post-human intelligence.
Right. An advanced AI could potentially just adjust its internal clock speed. It could experience 10,000 years of internal evolution, thought, development in what feels like a blink of an eye to us.
Which leads to that sobering question the sources raise. How would these incredibly different chrono-civilizations see us?
Well, the analogy used is pretty stark. They might see our entire civilization, our history, our frantic lives, the way we might look at, say, soap bubbles.
Fleeting,
Yeah.
ephemeral, beautiful for a moment, then gone.
Puts our whole existence into a humbling cosmic context, doesn't it?
It really does. Which inevitably brings us to the question, could we even communicate? Can you talk across these vast gulfs of time? Does time travel enter the picture?
The sources definitely engage with the physics possibilities here. They bring up the work by Kip Thorne and others back in the 80s.
On wormholes and time travel.
Sort of on the theoretical possibility, within general relativity, of things called closed time-like curves. Basically loops in space-time.
Loops that could, hypothetically, allow travel, or at least sending information back to the past.
Under very exotic conditions, maybe. It's highly speculative physics, of course. But the idea is, could an advanced civilization engineer these things? Perhaps not for travel, but for communication, sending messages backwards.
Okay, that's one possibility. What else do the sources suggest? Cosmic emails.
Maybe something like that. They talk about digital time capsules, but not physical boxes. Instead, information encoded into cosmic phenomena.
Light.
Like maybe patterns embedded in the light from distant quasars, or carried on gravity waves rippling through space-time, or even perhaps engineered signatures in the way certain particles decay over long periods.
So the idea is we could be, right now, surrounded by messages, broadcasts from the future, or maybe from these slow-time civilizations, woven into the fabric of the universe, and we just lack the dictionary,
Yeah.
the receiver.
That's the implication, a universe potentially full of encoded culture, but we don't know how to read it yet.
Of course, anytime you talk about sending messages to the past, you run into paradoxes.
The grandfather paradox, yeah. Kill your own ancestor before you're born, that kind of thing.
How do the sources handle that?
Well, they touch on one interpretation from physics. the many worlds interpretation associated with people like David Deutsch.
Where every quantum choice splits the universe.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
In that view, if you send a message back in time that could cause a paradox, it doesn't change your past. It just creates a new branching timeline where that message is received and history unfolds differently from that point.
So communication wouldn't be within one timeline, but potentially across timelines.
That's the idea. Chrono-civilizations might not just be separated by time, but by these different branches of reality.
And the sources have a term for this whole complex picture, right? Civilizations at different speeds in different eras may be communicating across time and timelines.
They call it a multi-temporal ecology.
An ecology, like a hidden ecosystem woven through space-time.
Yeah, a complex web, maybe largely invisible to us, of overlapping civilizations, each operating on its own temporal rhythm, possibly in its own branch of reality.
This whole deep dive, it really has flipped the script for me on, the search for alien life. We always ask, where are they?
But the core suggestion from this material is powerful. Maybe the better question, the deeper question, is when are they?
They might be living incredibly slow lives on the edge of gravity wells, or maybe they're ancient minds sleeping through cosmic ages, waiting.
Or racing through millennia inside simulations we can't even detect.
And their hello, if it ever comes, might not be a radio signal we recognize.
Exactly. It might be in subtle patterns of light across the cosmos, or in the decay rates of particles, or maybe even in the silences, the things that aren't happening on our timescale.
It makes you think. As we push out into space, exploring the where, maybe space isn't really the final frontier.
The perspective from these sources is pretty clear on that.
Time is.
Time is.
Yeah, and those cultures beyond time. The final thought the sources leave us with is, well, they might already be watching.